everybody, and welcome to the playoff edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. I am your host, Josh Harris. I am excited that we have playoff hockey because the last few weeks of the regular season were rough from the standpoint that most of the playoff seedings were done. Teams didn't really have a lot to play for. The hockey was pretty crummy outside of a few teams. Now we get some playoff hockey, which is still, I'll die on this hill, is the best playoff sport of the four majors. The playoff format, you can argue, is atrocious, but the hockey at least is really, really good. If you did complete the Ironman contest, there is that contest, the series showdown. The first that locks tonight. The series will be Colorado, Dallas. So make sure to get that. Or there we go. If we do have a 2-game slate here tonight as well, the puck drop contest, it's a $10 $20K to first. That will be on Monday on a 4-gamer, so that's nice. Joining me to break it down, this 2-game slate, maybe we'll talk some playoffs in general as well. So, Cliffy, what's going on?
Yeah, just not a whole lot. Just excited for the playoffs to start. You and I were talking before the show. Like, it was down the stretch, there was some tough games to watch. I will say, watching the Anaheim Ducks over the final month of the season, they were starting to turn things around, which is why, you and I were talking, I felt kind of surprised they fired their coach, just because the final 2 months, they actually looked like they were turning the page from bottom feeder to maybe being in the playoff mix next year. We'll see who they hire as a coach. There was a pretty tight race in the Eastern Conference, St. Louis and Minnesota and Vancouver and Calgary in the West. There were some good games, but there is nothing like playoff hockey. And it's weird. Usually the first round is by far I find the best hockey. Everybody's just so fired up, so ready to go. There's, 3, 4, there's 2 tonight, but there's usually 3 or 4 games every night, so on and so forth. Last year, I thought the second round was actually the better round. There's a couple, like the Islanders series in the first round and the Washington series and all that. There was a few matchups that were just pretty lopsided. Pretty excited about the first round this year. There are definitely lopsided matchups, but one of them features my Montreal Canadiens, so I can't be too angry about that. 2 games on the board here tonight. I don't think you could have 2 more diametrically opposed matchups than the 2 games we have here tonight. We had St. Louis going into Winnipeg, and then we have Colorado going into Dallas. We have one game where I wouldn't be shocked if it's 1-0 double overtime, and another game where I wouldn't be shocked if it's 7-5. So pretty interesting 2-gamer in that sense. Obviously, anything can happen when you're talking about a 2-game slate. That's what makes hockey so fun. Excited to break it down.
Yeah, and you kind of hinted at the biggest change between regular season hockey and playoff hockey. The games go until someone wins, and that's kind of important for DFS because if a game goes to double overtime, even if your goalie loses, the chances of him getting the saves bonus is very high. What was it, Elvis Merzlikins, that 6 overtime game against the Lightning a few seasons ago or whatever? That was ridiculous. Everyone on the team had a shot or block bonus. You know what I mean? You can't really stack a team expecting them to go to overtime. But this is 2 really good defensive teams, and I would be shocked if one of these games didn't go to overtime here.
Yeah, I think you're right completely about the first part. You can't stack games or teams thinking, oh, this one is the one that's going to go to double or triple overtime. That's just not the way it works. I would also say it's probably going to happen at some point this postseason if you're playing DFS all the way through, where you're not going to have anybody from those double or triple overtime games. and somebody's going to double stack two defensemen that are both going to have shot bonuses, and they're both going to have block bonuses, and they're going to have the goalie makes 51 saves or something like that, and you're just going to get absolutely smoked, and that's just the way it goes. It adds a different element. I'd say a little bit of a more luck element to DFS for the playoffs, but again, that's what makes it kind of fun.
Yeah. And it won't end in a shootout, which I think is the dumbest ending to an overtime that there is. I'm not smart enough to have an alternate ending. We discussed during the Four Nations, like they just went to 3-on-3 for 10 minutes. You saw how winded those players were at the end of the Canada game. Like Nathan McKinnon, in our defensive liking that, Nathan McKinnon was just firing at will for like a minute and a half straight. You're gonna be winded, but like, I don't know. I do really enjoy some overtime hockey, especially when my team isn't playing. Some of those Rangers games last year were just like, it took years off my life. Yeah, maybe we'll discuss some of these playoff matchups. You alluded to your Habs in a mismatch. Of the 1 seeds of all time in the East, like this isn't the best one I've ever seen. So like, honestly, I think the East is wide open. There's no matchup there's no team that's going to win. Like, ooh, that's surprising, at least in the first round. You know what I mean? Like if the Habs beat Washington, I'm not going to be like, wow, that's a massive upset. But yeah, it's pretty wide open in the East.
Yeah, I honestly think, I mean, maybe this is just my Habs bias. Like I agree. I wouldn't be completely shocked if the Habs beat Washington, just because I think Logan Thompson was back on the ice skating today. So that's a good sign for him. But obviously Washington's goaltending over the final couple of months of the season was just trash. And Charlie Lindgren has honestly not had a good season. And there is the opportunity for Sam Montembeault to steal the series. The one that would surprise me, I think, is New Jersey. Just because I wrote about this actually this morning at my on my newsletter, because I went over each series and I went like one advantage that the underdogs have or the disadvantage of the favorite that the underdogs could take advantage of, like those types of things. New Jersey had probably the best special teams in the NHL this season, like power play and penalty kill combined. And that includes post Jonas Siegenthaler, post Jack Hughes. Like they were still, I think what I wrote was, since Jack Hughes' injury, they were the only team in the NHL to be top 8 by power play goals per minute and top 8 by penalty kill goals against per minute. Like they were legitimately great on special teams. The problem is that they're getting the Carolina Hurricanes, who have the best penalty kill in the NHL. So if their power play can't carry them and it turns into a 5-on-5 matchup, like I really do think like Carolina just kind of walks that series in about 5 games. So I think that would be the one, honestly, that would surprise me, because I think New Jersey, the one advantage that they have over most teams is great special teams. One of the teams that they don't have that advantage over is Carolina. Like that's just kind of the way it is. In the West, I would be pretty surprised. I wouldn't say I'd be surprised if Minnesota wins. I don't know where you sit on that, but like up until like Christmas. Yeah, but the thing is like up until like Christmas, Minnesota was a top 3, top 5 team in the league. And then they got slammed by a bunch of injuries. Like it wasn't just Kaprizov and Eriksson Ek. Like Spurgeon was in and out of the lineup. Brodin missed a good chunk of time. It wasn't just the 2 forwards. Like there was a bunch of guys hurt quite often. And the thing is like they never really got healthy. Now they had everybody back by the end of the season, but it was a couple games to get everybody up to speed. And they didn't really look like the Minnesota Wild of October, November, December in those games. They looked like the Minnesota Wild of January, February, and March, which is why, like, if the Minnesota Wild of the first 30, 35 games of the season shows up, they can beat Vegas. And it wouldn't even take 7 games. Like it'd be one of those things where they can win a bunch of 2-1, 3-2 games and beat Vegas in 5 or 6 games. If the Minnesota Wild of calendar 2025 shows up, Vegas might sweep. So that I think that's one where like I wouldn't be shocked, but it completely depends on which Minnesota team shows up because they've been basically two entirely different teams this season.
Yeah, and also Vegas is healthy, and if their power play starts rolling, it's going to be tough because the Wild's penalty kill sucks, even with everybody healthy. So, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of intrigue in that series. There's a lot of intrigue in these series. The Kings and the Oilers are playing each other for the 97th postseason in a row in the first round. That's the only series where we differ. We both put out our first round predictions. You had the Kings in 7. I had the Oilers in 7. I really didn't know. I didn't have a super lean, so I just leaned to Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. I would not be shocked if the series goes 7 and whoever wins. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I again, just to refer back to the newsletter I wrote about this morning, when like Zach Hyman got hurt earlier in the season, it's like early November, he missed like 3 weeks or a month or something like that. When he came back over the final, 4.5 months of the season, when their top power play unit was healthy, their top power play unit was probably the best in the NHL. The problem was, McDavid missed some time. McDavid got suspended. Then McDavid got hurt, and then Draisaitl got hurt, and guys were in and out of the lineup basically from November onward. So it's just a matter of having everybody healthy. In the three, you mentioned like this is the 4th year in a row these two teams are playing each other in the first round. The 3 prior series went 18 total games, and Edmonton scored 25 power play goals in those 18 games. Like, if the Oilers score like over a power play goal per game, this is done in 5 games. You know what I mean? Like that's the Kings just can't combat that. But if the Kings penalty kill can actually hold up, I think they win the series. That's the difference. Is that I think the Oilers have a big special teams edge, and if that special teams edge comes through, they're just going to beat the piss out of the Kings. But I'm having faith in the Kings penalty kill holding up. I guess we'll see what happens.
I think the biggest X factor in this series for me is Quentin Byfield, because he is coming into his own. Like, this is the best chance the Kings have to beat the Oilers here. He's a monster.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the Kings do have 3 lines that they can play. Like that was another thing, is like there were times, most of the time in the last 3 years, they had 2 lines. They had the Kopitar line, and then they had the second line with Deneau, Arvidsson, and Moore. And then you had the top line with Kopitar, Kempe, and Byfield, and then the third line was like, I hope you guys don't get ran over, and that happened. Now they legitimately have 3 really good lines. I think that's a difference as well.
Yeah. Let's get into these 2 West matchups. It's an interesting slate, honestly, because, and we'll talk about it obviously right now, there's some wild ownership here projected on a couple of these lines that I don't particularly love. But let's talk about it. Before we get into it, if you do want to support us further, you can click the link in the chat. Use promo code Stochastic15. That'll get you 15% off any week or month membership. Even if you're already signed up with hockey and you want to try out baseball or PGA or MMA, just click the link, use that promo code. It'll give you a spin at 15% off. Let's get into this first game here. The first game of the playoffs is actually hilarious because it is a very low total, and it is 2 of the best defensive teams in the league. St. Louis Blues with a 2.3 total. Heading into Winnipeg, the Jets have a 3 total. Winnipeg, I didn't see any news on Velarde. I know. Last week or a few days ago, the coach said that Ehlers is week to week. I don't know if
Velarde's there. He was skating. Wasn't in like line rushes or anything like that. And they said he's day to day. So like it might be one of those things. Maybe he comes back in like game 3 or something like that. I mean, maybe he shows up for warm up, but I'm not expecting him in the lineup.
Yeah, I'm not expecting him tonight either. Currently, Winnipeg, Connor, Scheifele, Iafallo, Perfidi, Niederreiter, Nemestikov, Lowry, Appleton, Tanev. Blues, Thomas, Buchnevich, Neighbors, Kyrou, Shen, Snuggerud, Bolduc, Sundqvist, Joseph. Now, strangely enough, the Winnipeg top line here is projected for the most ownership of the night. Now, I kind of get it. They're 18-1. They're fully correlated. But here's the issue that I'm running into. And it's not an Alex Iafallo thing at the top, which everyone's be like, oh, he fucking hates Iafallo. But here's a little bit more to it than that. The Thomas Buchnevich Neighbors line, like, I don't know how they're going to match up here without Ehlers, and now they have Tanev on the Appleton line.
Yeah, I just to jump in, once Velarde and Ehlers were both hurt, they started using the top line a lot more in the shutdown matchup. So I think it's going to be like top line versus top line, and then you're going to see Lowry go out against the second, maybe the third line from St. Louis.
And that's a problem for Winnipeg because the St. Louis top line, until Holloway comes back, is pretty much their only really good defensive line. On top of that, where you can really beat the Blues is on the penalty kill. They have one of the worst penalty kills in the league. The power play without Velarde struggled mightily. You take Ehlers out of there, who is probably their second most important player on the power play. Now they're running Connor, Scheifele, Iafallo, Perfidi, and Morrissey. Can it still get there? Yes. But at 36% ownership here, I don't know, man. Like, if you're relying on a power play without the two most important players on it, like, can they get there on 5-on-5? Sure. Like, the Thomas Buchnevich Neighbors line is good defensively, but it wasn't like it was Shen, Holloway, Kyrou. They were just one of the best defensive lines in the league, especially after Jim Montgomery took over. Maybe Winnipeg adjusts and gets them out against the middle six, and those are better matchups, and, they could pay off at their price. But I worry about the power play here without Velarde and Ehlers. Can it still happen? Sure. Do I want to bank my night on a 36% Winnipeg one line? I'm not entirely sure. If you want to go down the lineup, Perfidi, Niederreiter, Nemestikov coming in almost 25%. That's like Vladislav Nemestikov fits in fairly well with this team. He's just not very good for DFS. It's like, I honestly don't mind a Perfidi, Niederreiter two-man because, if they're not going to see Thomas Buchnevich Neighbors, like, yes, we've talked about it a lot that Snuggerud is going to be a good player. He cannot even come close to replicating what Holloway did on either end of the ice. So, honestly, I don't mind a two-man of Perfidi Niederreiter. I don't even mind a two-man of Appleton Lowry. Like, Lowry is their second best center on the team, and it's not particularly close. So, like, for me, like, that ownership on Winnipeg one, I'm balking at. If you want to play them, that's fine. For me, I prefer to go down the lineup with two-mans, Perfidi Niederreiter, Lowry, Appleton. I just, I'm worried about the power play. Maybe they prove me wrong and they score 3 power play goals tonight, and I'm eating a big chunk of crow. But until they can show me that, I'm worried about it. So I'm going down the lineup for Winnipeg. On the Blues side, it's pretty interesting here because even with the injuries to Velarde and Ehlers, this is still a brutal, brutal matchup for St. Louis. It's still Hellebuck. It's still really good defensive lines. And, the one spot you can get Winnipeg really is on the power play. And their power play isn't anything special. It's not like Flyers bad, but it's not like top in the NHL. So the one reason I would play Thomas Buchnevich Neighbors here tonight is they're coming in at 8% projected. For a line that's going to play over 20 minutes here tonight, it's 16.5. That is almost no ownership. The problem is like, beating Hellebuck and paying off their price. I just don't know if they can do that. But like at that price, for how good they've been historically. I'm willing to give them a chance in MME. Do I get to them in single entry? I don't know. I'd be more likely to one-off like a Buchnevich, a Kyrou, something like that, a Snuggerud. If I was going to one-off somebody, it would be a shooter more than a playmaker here. So I'd lean more towards like a one-off Kyrou or one-off Snuggerud, one-off Buchnevich, something like that, even though he doesn't, isn't a super high volume shooter. I don't know if I'm going to full stack the Blues. I don't really know if I'm going to full stack Winnipeg. And, there's only 2 games on this slate. So, you do need someone from this game. So it's more likely to me I'll have one-offs or two-mans.
Yeah. I think the power play is really the most important point here because St. Louis's penalty kill was really bad for most of the year. And that even carried, as you mentioned, and that carried over into Montgomery's tenure. It did get better down the stretch, like March 1st onward. It was a lot better than it was earlier in the season. Whether the final 7 weeks of the season is something that we can rely on, I don't really think so, but I think it's notable that it did get better as the season got later, although I think they had a pretty easy schedule, at least in March. So I think that might have factored into it. But even setting aside a St. Louis power play or penalty kill, that may or may not be better, the Winnipeg power play is definitely worse, as you mentioned, without Iafallo and Ehlers. And that was a big part of Winnipeg's success this season was the power play. And it's not just the top power play unit either. The second power play unit, when everybody was healthy with like Perfidi and Nemesnikov and whomever, was one of the best secondary power play units in the NHL. So it wasn't just power play 1, it was power play 2 as well. But now, you take Ehlers and Ehlers and Velarde out, you got to move up Iafallo and Perfidi. So now you're changing the top unit, but you're also changing the second unit. So you're taking guys off of that. It just makes everything worse. And I mentioned it again, just to refer back to the newsletter. I'm just going back to it because I did, go through these series by series. The Winnipeg power play, once everybody got injured, when everybody was healthy, the Winnipeg power play was arguably the best in the NHL. In fact, if you look like over the entire season, Winnipeg did finish first by goals per minute at 5-on-4. Now, part of that is because the second unit was so good, whereas teams typically don't have that. But the top unit was great. But the top unit's shot rates went down something like 20% once the injuries started hitting. And the goal rate went from elite, like Tampa Bay, Edmonton level elite, to good, but not elite, like, Pittsburgh, Florida type things. That's a difference. Like, that is a pretty significant difference when you go from this is the best in the league to, yeah, this is good. You know what I mean? So, like, if you want me to play like a 35-40% Winnipeg line with a power play that is demonstrably worse against a St. Louis team that, as good as Winnipeg was, and they were great, once Montgomery took over, St. Louis is a top 5 defensive team in the NHL. It's basically like Winnipeg, Los Angeles, St. Louis, 1, 2, 3. You can argue maybe if you want to put Florida in there or something like that, but they were basically one of the best defensive teams in the league of their own. So like 36% St. Louis or Winnipeg 1, 24% Winnipeg 2. Like, that's just not something I'm interested in on a slate like this. So I'm out on the Winnipeg top guys. I think if I have any interest in the Jets, it's the cheap guys. You mentioned how good the third line is. Like, Lowry and Tanev didn't have much of a sample together, only 50 minutes, because Tanev, it was a deadline acquisition. After he got there, he spent most of the time on the fourth line. 61 shot attempts, 3.4 expected goals per 60 in those 50 minutes together. So they were fine. And even the Winnipeg fourth line, we don't usually talk about fourth lines on this show. We also don't usually cover 2-game slates. And, that Winnipeg fourth line was legitimately good. Like, Morgan Barron David Gustafsson, 200 minutes together at 5-on-5, 59 shot attempts, 2.7 expected goals, 27 shots per 60 minutes. Like, those are all above average. Those are above average offensive numbers from a fourth line. So, like, if you want a two-man, Lowry and Appleton or something like that, fine. If you're playing a bunch of lineups, I think you can even dig deeper and do like a one-off Morgan Barron or Gustafsson, Barron two-man, like something like that. Just because that line has generally been really good this year. And, when you're talking 2-game slates, you have to consider every single player in the lineup. I honestly think I'm kind of with you that I generally have a little bit more interest in the St. Louis side. It's interesting. I was looking at Buchnevich and Thomas this season against the Jets. Like most people, they got absolutely just smothered offensively. So it's not like I really love St. Louis here, but as you mentioned, 16,500 at 8% ownership for a top line where they're at least 2 out of the 3 guys are going to play 20 plus minutes. Neighbors will probably still play like 16, 17. It's a brutal matchup, but I think it's one of those things where, if I don't even know if there's a 20 backs. I didn't look. I just looked at single entries today. If I had a 20 max, like I would probably have 1 or 2 of the St. Louis top line. The second line I'm less in on. As you mentioned, I don't think Snuggerud can replace what Holloway brought. St. Louis 3 is kind of interesting. Bolduc, Sundqvist, and Joseph. They split power play time, but, since being united, basically, 60 shot attempts, 2.6 expected goals, only 1.8 actual goals because they're shooting a little over 6%. I don't expect their shooting percentage to turn around greatly against Connor Hellebuck, but they have been good in their own right. They'll probably see the most time of any of those top 3 lines from St. Louis against the third defense pair from the Jets. And I mentioned that because the Morrissey DeMello pair, they kind of struggled in the first couple months, especially DeMello. The last 3-4 months, great numbers. Pionk and Sandberg, generally really, really good all season long. You get to that third pair, not quite the same thing when you're looking at Luke Schenn and Logan Stanley. Those guys just aren't good. So I do think St. Louis 3 could take advantage of that third defense pair from Winnipeg. So honestly, I don't mind Thomas Buchnevich Neighbors. I think that's more MME for me. In this game, I think this is where I'm looking for my cheap players to pair with the expensive players in the next game.
Yeah, I'm there with you. So now this game's going to be 6-5, and then Colorado will be 2-1. But let's move on to that game. The Colorado Avalanche are heading into Dallas. Into Dallas? Yeah, into Dallas. To face the Stars. Man, if these teams were fully healthy, the Avs are pretty healthy, but if the Stars were healthy, this would be the series. But they're missing Heiskanen. We've talked a ton about how that kills them defensively. Now they're missing Jason Robertson, who's their best offensive player. It's not arguably their best player, is their best player. That's a massive loss on the offensive end. So now their lines are Johnston, Rantanen, Ben, Duchesne, Sagan, Marchment, Hintz, Granlund, Dodonov. Just like if Evgeny Dodonov is in your top 9 for a playoff team, you're gonna struggle. It's a problem. He, at this point in his career, he needs to be on the 4th line or watching from the press box with binoculars and maybe some popcorn with some butter. On the top line with Hintz and Granlund is a problem. Colorado's going McKinnon, Netchus, Lehkonen, Nishushkin, Nelson, Drouin, Coyle, Colton, Kiwi, Ranta. It looks like Gabriel Landeskog will not be returning tonight. Jared Bednar's trying to play it coy, but the beat writers are he was out skating with the scratches, so chances are we may see him later in the series. He also practiced on the quote-unquote 5th line yesterday, so he's probably going to be out. Listen, McKinnon, Netchus, Lehkonen, that line was disgusting as soon as Netchus got to Colorado. They're 20,400. They should be priced like Tampa 1 was all season. Their expected goals, their actual goals, their shots per 60, their everything per 60 is disgusting. 45.4% top two stack, 29.3% projected ownership. The one qualm I would have about that line is they're not fully correlated. However, Arturi Lehkonen, one of the better 5-on-5 players in the league this season. I think he only had like 4 power play points this season, something like that, and he had a pretty good season.
Yeah, and even without the power play time, he's probably going to play, I mean, at least 18 minutes, if not 19 to 20, and he'll be on with the empty net, honestly, whether they need a goal or are trying to prevent one. So,
yeah. So I have no issue here, just full stack in Colorado 1. They were arguably the best line in the NHL when they were together. They took some injuries late in the season, so they had to, break up that line. The other thing is they haven't played in a week. Not that that's a huge concern, but we talked about it in season when they were doing buys. These teams coming off buys generally have played pretty bad. Now, McKinnon was sitting because he had a nagging injury, this and that. Like, again, if there's one team I'm not really concerned about with it, it's the Avs.
That's the one thought I had in my head. I was like, for 31 teams in the NHL, I'd be like, I'm not so sure. Colorado Avalanche, fuck, it's like they played 2 days ago. I don't care.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah. So my favorite line on this slate is Colorado 1, but we need to talk about the rest of Colorado here. I think Colorado 2 is in a pretty good spot. Now, Brock Nelson struggled to find his footing with Colorado, but now he has Nichushkin and Drouin on his wings. They're both on the top power play unit. They're 16,100, 13.1% top two stack. Am I more likely to play them than St. Louis 1? Probably by a little bit. Like, there's no matchup concerns on Dallas. None of these lines are going to be good defensively. Their best defensive line might be Johnston, Ben Rantanen, and that just does not strike me as a scary line defensively. So I don't mind Colorado 2 here. If you are going expensive Winnipeg, and there isn't really truly like a super expensive Winnipeg, I don't mind Colorado 3, like Coyle, Colton, Kiviranta. Like Kiviranta, I think is min price. And he did score 4 goals against the Avs with Dallas in, I think, a few seasons ago. But I'd be more likely to 2-man like a Coyle Colton if you need a cheaper 2-man. Even like Drury O'Connor on the 4th line. Not that like I'm going out of my way to play 3rd and 4th liners here tonight, but like Coyle and Colton may play like non-overtime, like 13, 14, 15 minutes. Drury and O'Connor may play like 11, 12. But realistically, this is a Colorado 1 game or bust for me. Like, if you want to leave off Lehkonen, add Nichushkin, you want a full power play stack and go find some cheap guys elsewhere, that's fine. I'm fine with Colorado 1 full stacking. I don't know if I'd full stack Colorado 2. I like them. It's just like, why would I play Colorado 2 when Colorado 1 is in a like just as good a spot with McKinnon, with Netchus, the 2 most important players on their power play. Dallas's penalty kill has struggled. The only saving grace, Andre could steal a game. I don't know. So like, I'm very much in on Colorado. Dallas, on the other hand, this is a pretty tough matchup. Like, even when Colorado had Georgiev and those goalies, they played well defensively. It was just the goalies couldn't stop a nosebleed. This is a pretty tough matchup. Now, they can dictate matchups. Not that it's a huge deal. And Tyler Seguin is also back. And Duchesne, Seguin, Marchment have been excellent together for seasons now. They're only 13,000. 24.2% projected ownership. It's high, but they're only 13,000. They're probably going to play 17, 18 minutes. Like Wyatt Johnston will play the most, but honestly, I think the second line is going to get the second most minutes of anyone on Dallas. Like it may go like Johnston, Rantanen, Duchesne. Like I'm not even confident that like Rope, Hintz, Granlund, Dadonov are going to play a bunch because Dadonov might play only 13 minutes or something like that, and they'll double shift Johnston or something like that. So I think, Duchesne, Sagan, Marchment would be my favorite line on Dallas. If you want to go to Rantanen and Johnston, Ben, at 16-2, that's fine. But this is another spot where I'm worried about the power play without Jason Robertson, which is why I like the Duchesne, Sagan, Marchment line more, because that second unit for seasons has been excellent. And when the top unit is struggling, they tend to do like a 60-40 split. And Harley just plays both units, and we'll obviously get to defenseman at the end. It's not a good power play matchup. It's not a great 5-on-5 matchup, but at 13,000, I'm willing to give it a shot. I don't mind Johnson, Rantanen, and Ben. More likely to play Sagan, Duchesne, Marchment. I don't have a ton of interest in Hintz, Granlund, Dadonov. If you want to play them, I think the one thing that you could hope is Dadonov just doesn't play a bunch and you one off of Michael Granlund, because Granlund was playing a ton of minutes towards the end of the season, but now that was on the Duchesne line. If you think Dadonov, they're just not going to play him and they'll double shift Hintz and Granlund, I think one-offing one of those guys is fine. But for me, it's Duchesne, Sagan, Marchment.
So I'll go over Dallas first. Rope Hintz over the last 2 seasons has played a little over 240 minutes without either Jason Robertson or Wyatt Johnston on his line. Obviously, Robertson is out, and Johnston is playing with Rantanen. In those minutes, 52 shot attempts, 2.4 expected goals, 1.5 actual goals per 60. So, obviously, if you're using an optimizer, you don't cross anybody out. Like this was the first, honestly, before any of the fourth lines on this slate, this was the first line I crossed off for my single entry. Dallas 2 is a lot more interesting because, as you mentioned, Duchesne, Marchment, Sagan have been good going back to last season. 200 minutes this season, 4.5 goals per 60. Now, it does suck that they were broken up, like the Robertson injury for power play purposes. Got Matt Duchesne to the top unit, so now they're split up on the power play. That kind of sucks. But at 13K, I don't think you really need perfect correlation. And listen, we've talked about it. We might have talked about this series more than any other series in our Discord. If Robertson was healthy, I would say the Stars really have a fighting chance because the Stars, even without Heiskanen, are still arguably the best offensive team in the league. You take Robertson out, things get a lot more muddled. When I was looking at the tracking numbers for the series, like the player tracking, Colorado and Dallas this season were both well above average in creating high danger passes and high danger shots at 5-on-5, and well below average at giving them up defensively. So like, I do think Colorado wins this series. I also think even without Robertson, there's going to be a game where Dallas pops off for 5 goals and Colorado could still win. Like think of Colorado Winnipeg last year. Like Colorado, I forget what it was. Colorado gave up 9 goals or 10 goals in the first 2 games and won both games.
In Winnipeg.
Yeah, in Winnipeg. So just because Dallas scores a bunch doesn't mean they're necessarily going to win. But I do think even without Robertson, the rest of the forwards are still good enough to have 1 or 2 big offensive games. The question is kind of like, when does it happen? I think that Dallas second line would be the line that I'd be most interested in. We have Rantanen and Johnston, Ben listed as a third line. That's the way lineup websites have it. It's their top line. Especially with Robertson out, like Rantanen's, I'd be fairly surprised if he doesn't play 20 minutes. Johnston's probably going to be close to that. Even Jamie Benn might play 15 minutes here tonight. At 16,200, I don't think you can necessarily bet against it. obviously the Dallas defense group is thinned out, but they still have Thomas Harley and they still have Esa Lindell. And, Lindell's value is more defensive than offensive, but at least it'll keep him from getting pinned in their zone. And Thomas Harley's I think legitimately a Norris caliber defenseman now. So at 16,200, I do think you really have to consider Johnston, Ben, and Rantanen in here, just because they're going to get minutes. I think they're going to be fine offensively, honestly, as long as because Thomas Harley is going to play 30 minutes. So I do think that they're going to get some goals in this series. It's just a matter of when it happens. At 16,200, I think it's perfectly fine. That Dallas, Rantanen, and Johnston Ben line does have the third highest top two stack percentage of any line here tonight behind the top lines for Colorado and Winnipeg. So I think that's a line I'm really considering, although Duchesne, Seguin, and Marchment just fine. All that said, this is a Colorado one game for me. Colorado won 79 shot attempts, 4.4 expected goals, 3.6 actual goals per 60. Before McKinnon got hurt, he was playing 24, 25 minutes a game, and that was basically with the lineup that we're seeing here tonight. He's going to play a ton. Martin Necas will probably play 21 minutes, maybe 22 minutes. Lehkonen will push 20. I'm not worried about any of the matchups coming back from the Dallas side. At 20,400, very reasonably priced, especially when you consider that there are a lot of cheap options in that Winnipeg St. Louis series that you can go through. The other thing is the Dallas penalty kill in the first 2/3 of the season was one of the best in the league. And I think predictably without Heiskanen, it fell off quite a bit down the stretch. It fell from a top 3, top 5 penalty kill to middle of the league. And the Dallas power play with Martin Necas was at 12 goals per 60 minutes. That's Tampa Bay, Edmonton territory. So I really do like Colorado one. They're the top 2 stack on the board. They're my personal favorite stack. It's just a matter of, is there, some third and fourth liners that you don't mind pairing them with here tonight, because Colorado one is the best line here.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to talk about defensemen now. I think I'm more likely to play Thomas Harley than I would Mikko Rantanen here tonight, but there is going to be, this could potentially still be a very high scoring series, despite how good Colorado is defensively. Let's talk about these defensemen. If it wants to load for me, there we go. The top of the board, Cale Makar, 7,900. After that, Thomas Harley's the next expensive at 5,500. You have Josh Morrissey at 5,400. And then after that, there's no one above 5K. Price-wise, I almost would rather play Harley than Makar. 5,500 is cheap for Harley. But again, if I'm doing anything with the Colorado power play, I probably want to have Makar in there. Just he is really expensive with Colorado. So Makar, Harley, easily 1-2 for me. Morrissey's fine from a peripheral standpoint. I worry about the power play. So I'm more likely to just keep dropping down to a Parayko or a Fowler or something like that, Lindell. So in the top range, it's easily Makar, Harley, 1-2. Morrissey's fine especially if you're playing Winnipeg. I don't think I'd one-off Morrissey tonight. I would include him in my Winnipeg stacks, but Makar, Harley, easily 1-2.
Yeah, Makar is the top of the board. I showed it earlier for projections here. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. Morrissey is second. That's Winnipeg having that 3.0 total. I'm kind of with you. I do worry about the power play. I think that same argument would go to Thomas Harley. I do worry about Dallas's power play without Robertson. Here's the thing. I wasn't kidding when I said I think Harley plays 30 minutes tonight. I do think he pushes 30 minutes here tonight. Things are so bad. They have Alex Petrovic in the lineup. You know what I mean? Alex Petrovic is not playing 17 or 18 minutes here tonight, unless either team is up 6-0.
Or it's a quadruple overtime game.
Yeah, exactly. I do think Harley's cruising past 25 minutes, and I think he pushes for 30. So that's why I don't mind Morrissey. considering how many minutes I think Harley gets, that's kind of why I have Harley ahead. Parayko, I think, is another good call, just because like he doesn't eat. At Parayko at like 5,700, I don't have a ton of interest in. At 4,300, if he gets a block bonus in like 3 shots, you know what I mean? You're kind of fine. So like, I think Parayko 4,300 makes a lot of sense here tonight. He does have a very strong point per dollar projection as well. So I don't mind Parayko. Esa Lindell, basically for the same reason as Harley. Like, I don't think Lindell pushes 30 minutes, but I do think he could push 25. Devin Taves, if you don't want to pay up for Makar, I think certainly. Cody Ceci, you know, somebody has to play the non-Lindell Harley minutes. He's number 3, so he's there. Neil Pionk is projecting well. Philip Broberg is kind of interesting. I think he's really good offensively, and I just worry about ice time because I do think he's behind Fowler. I do think he's behind Parayko. I do think he's even behind Falk now. So like the number 4 defenseman and on the road against Winnipeg, it's like I'd probably just rather play Dylan Sandberg. If you need a cheap defenseman, like I guess like Luke Shen or something, but I don't think I'm going under $3K for defenseman here.
Yeah, I think the guys playing are like Eric Johnson, Ryan Suter, Alex Petrovic, Leon Bichelle. You know what I mean? So, like, if you're going to go under there, make sure the guy you choose is playing. Let's talk goalie here. There's only 4 goalies. Hellebuck, Blackwood, Ottinger, Binnington. Hellebuck is the most expensive here. I think all 4 goalies are fine. I think, honestly, the most interesting one to me is Binnington, because the Blues are a good defensive team, and if they can not blow up on the penalty kill, I don't know how winnable the game is, but like in a very close game and how expensive some Colorado stuff is, that $1,000 drop from Hellebuck to Binnington matters. Like, obviously my favorite play is Hellebuck, and then Blackwood, and then like it goes from the most expensive to least expensive. That's how I put them in order. It's just I think like Binnington is a very interesting play here at 7,200 if they can keep the Winnipeg power play off the board.
Yeah, Hellebuck is number 1. Like his point projection is like 2.5 points higher than the next, 2.5 points higher than the next closest goalie. He has by far the best point per dollar projection. So like Connor Hellebuck, I think, makes the most sense. I'm not gonna lie, Jake Ottinger really crossed my mind if for anybody that's not playing Colorado. Honestly, even if you are playing the Avs, like, is this a game where Colorado wins 4-1 with an empty netter? Ottinger gives up 3 goals on 39 shots or something like that. Like, since February 1st, Jake Ottinger has faced 31.8 shots against per game, and he's not facing the Colorado Avalanche in all those games, right? So, like, I think it was 21 starts in that stretch, and he saw at least 35 shots in 8 or 9 of them. That's a lot of volume. So, like, I don't know. I think Connor Hellebuck obviously is easily number 1. You know, if you want to just kind of, I do think Colorado wins here tonight. I don't want to say lock in the win because that's just not a good way to think in playoffs, but I think Blackwood makes sense. But honestly, for me, it's between Hellebuck and Ottinger. It just kind of depends on like how much Colorado you play here tonight. Because I think even if you like one off Nathan McKinnon or play like a McKinnon, Makar 2-man or something like that, Ottinger's still viable. So that's why, like, I think Ottinger should be considered basically in just about any kind of lineup other than like a Colorado power play stack.
Well, you don't want a Sahil Sud. He would Josh stack against his goalie in cash when he played NHL cash games. I would always scoop him and lose. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't power play stack against my goalie, but three guys against my goalie here tonight is not as big of a deal as it would be on like a 4 or 5 game slate. Again, you like a goalie, you play him. We will be back on Monday. It's going to be a 4-game slate. It has the playoff puck drop. There should be some juicy-ish GPPs compared to the last few weeks of the season. So that should be fun. For like first round of the playoffs, as long as the GPPs are decent enough, we'll probably be here. We'll take it day by day. I don't want to guarantee us being here and then the GPPs are crap and we have to renege on our word, but we'll take it day by day. We'll let you know in Discord, on Twitter, on Blue Sky, everywhere you see us, we'll let you know. So 2 questions: who you liking for your hat trick pick, and who's your Stanley Cup winner?
For the Cup winner, I have Vegas and Tampa Bay in the final, and Vegas winning. So I do think Vegas feels like one of those seasons where nobody's talking about Vegas, and then it's like you look up a month later, and all of a sudden they're in the Western Conference Final. I do think, and I think Tampa Bay is the best team in the East. So we'll see how that goes. My hat trick pick for tonight is, former Dallas Star, current Colorado Avalanche, Valeri Nichushkin.
I thought you were going to say Joel Kiviranta for a second there.
Oh, that's the first guy that popped in your head?
I have issues. But I have Colorado over Tampa in the Stanley Cup. If the Avs can stay healthy and Blackwood plays like he did in the regular season, they're going to be really tough to beat. Whoever wins the Battle of Florida, I think, comes out of the East. My hat trick pick, it's kind of hard because there's only 4 teams, and I have to keep it a little bit spicy here because that's just who I am. Adam Lowry.
Ooh, that is spicy. I like it.
But yeah, we'll see you guys on Monday. There are 3 games tomorrow, I think. But
I think it's 3, 4, 4, if I'm not mistaken, the next 3 days.
We don't roll on Sundays. It's the Shiver Shabbos. But we'll see you on Monday. And good luck, everybody, tonight.
Good luck tonight, everyone.